Zoo-wee mama, how's it going everybody? I'm here today to talk about one of the most interesting, fun, and flexible cards we have had come into Marvel Snap all year. I am talking about Nocturne. Nocturne comes out alongside Blink the first week of the new May season, the Exile season, so she'll be in Spotlight caches alongside Kyera and Celine starting on May 7th. Now, Nocturne is a 3-cost, 5-powered card with the ability that you can move this once. When this moves, replace its location with a random new one. Okay, so similar to her lore in Marvel Comics, Nocturne has the ability that's a combination of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. So you can move her once, just like Nightcrawler, and when you move, she's going to replace the location that she moves to with a random new one, just like Scarlet Witch, where it's a random swap. But you can trigger this more than once. If you do move Nocturne multiple times, she will change multiple locations. So there's some real shenanigans there, and I'm going to go over her best synergies, some deck ideas for her, the good, the bad, the ugly, the Spotlight week itself, and just give my overall thoughts and ratings on Nocturne. So let's get into it. So to look at some of Nocturne's best synergies, we are going to start off with Kraven. Look, Nocturne can move, and Kraven loves cards that move. Okay, so anything that loves move likes Nocturne, and it's actually a bit unique to have a card that moves that also provides some kind of utility or tech. So Nocturne can really fill that same move spot, but add something extra that these type of decks don't have. It's also good with just Elsa Bloodstone or Angela, things, you can play a card, power up, and then move the card away. Then we've got Silver Surfer because Nocturne costs 3. 3-cost cards like Silver Surfer, and Silver Surfer decks don't run Storm that much. They used to way back in the day when Surfer added 3 power, but then you had trouble winning the Storm lane after Surfer got nerfed. But now Surfer might have some location tech once again with Nocturne. You could also try her with like Cerebro for Cerebro 5 deck, but I don't think that deck really needs her or even Cerebro, but you will get some wins there. And then Legion. Legion is so good with Nocturne, okay? I'm a huge Legion fan myself. I love playing him, but he's great on some specific locations. If you can get Bar with No Name or even locations that give negative power and you have Luke Cage in your deck, Legion pops off, and Nocturne is going to increase your chances of seeing these unique locations where cards like Legion can just simply win you the game. So let's look at the good and the bad for Nocturne. First up, for the good, she does 2 good things. Okay, this is a deck building dream, and cards that do 2 beneficial things at the same time are often very strong because they're just so good and they consistently produce high value. So if you want a deck that has a card that moves, you can put Nocturne. If you want a deck that has a card for changing locations, you can put in Nocturne. Okay, and if you want a deck that can do both, you just put in Nocturne, and she only takes up 1 space in that deck, so it's really efficient and it makes more room for other cards, right? You don't need a separate Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch, you just need 1 card in Nocturne. Very good there. She's got the best stats for Location Changer. I mean, Scarlet Witch is a 2-3. Nocturne does cost a 1 more, but she's got a whole 5 power, right? Storm is a 3-2, Magic is a 3-2, Rhino is a 3-3, Nocturne's a 3-5. That is just the best stats for a location changing card that we have in Snap. She does trigger each time you move, like I mentioned, so maybe this would be needed, but if anything, this is just fun for some shenanigans. We're going to see some like Nocturne into Hercules play, people just trying to change locations as many times as possible. She's 3 costs, that's always going to produce some Silver Surfer synergy, like I mentioned, and then she's just so easy to put in any deck. She's so easy to play. You play her and you can just choose to move her once or not. And she's just easy to have fun. Okay, this is just a great, fun card. I don't think it's going to piss people off. It doesn't seem like toxic where it's going to annoy your opponents. But it's going to be fun to play yourself. It might be fun to watch your opponent move it and see what happens there. Great fun in Nocturne. She just does a ton of things. In terms of the bad, In order to surprise your opponent, you need to play Nocturne and move her on the same turn. Okay, if your opponent played Magic and they have Limbo down, so they're trying to make the game 7 turns long, and you had Scarlet Witch, well, you could just play Scarlet Witch on Limbo on turn 6. Okay, Nocturne doesn't do that. In order for Nocturne to replace a location, you need to move Nocturne, but you can only move her after you play her with her own ability. So you would have to play Nocturne on turn 3, 4, or 5, and then move her on turn 6, but your opponent would see your Nocturne is on the board, okay? So they know you can just move her to get rid of Limbo, so they're gonna prepare for that. In order to surprise them, you would actually need to play Nocturne plus Ghost Spider or something on the same turn, so you'd actually need another card to move Nocturne in order to make it a surprise for your opponent, so she kind of misses out on that value there. She's pretty bad at actually sneaking into restrictive locations. Okay, cards like Nocturne or Jeff, it's very good with something like Sanctum Sanctorum, right? You play them in different lane, you can move them into Sanctum Sanctorum. Well, if you moved Nocturne into Sanctum Sanctorum, she's gonna change that location. It's probably gonna be something neutral, and then it's no longer restrictive, and now your opponent can actually play there. So you'd have to wait until turn 6 to move Nocturne in, so that way it changes, but then your opponent doesn't have any more turns to play stuff. There's obviously RNG involved. You may move to a location and actually make it worse for you and or better for your opponent, and it might hurt you there. Okay, you're gonna see some RNG. Same thing with Scarlet Witch. And just because you can change the locations doesn't mean you should. If a location is neutral, you do run the risk of making it worse or making it better for your opponent, or sometimes maybe you just shouldn't move her, okay? Like, you don't need to move Nocturne every game. You might just be happy with her 5 power on the location she's at. So don't be tempted. Don't feel like you're forced to move her each and every time. This is just my friendly reminder to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because we cover every single new card release in Marvel Snap. To talk about the floor and ceiling for Nocturne, let's start off with her floor, her reasonable worse. Move once and replace its location with a harmful one. Okay, again, you run the risk that you're actually making a location worse for you or better for your opponent, okay? That you actually wish you could just move and not change the location. That will happen from time to time. That's still viable, okay? It's above the line of being viable. It's still a 3/5. It's still producing some value. And in fact, I think that's still above the line of being competitive, okay? There's actually not that many bad locations you could actually make because Nocturne's moving on turn 4 or later. So, you know, Scarlet Witch could make like Death's Domain or Murder World, and Murder World would destroy cards on turn 3. So if you played Scarlet Witch on turn 2, she might actually kill herself essentially because she made the location something that kills her. Nocturne doesn't move herself until at least turn 4. So Murder World wouldn't be activated. She would just sit there in Death's Domain, and that might actually be good for you if now your opponent can't play there. There's actually not that many locations that are just going to be really bad. Sometimes you might just help your opponent. Now to look at Nocturne at her reasonable best, I think it's actually very similar. You're going to move her once per her own ability and replace that location with a helpful one. Okay, so it's either going to be good for you and or bad for your opponent. So it switches to a location that you prefer. You're still getting a 3/5, and now you're actually getting the bonus of a positive location. Now, I'm not sure this is overpowered. A lot of cards have a floor that's below the line of competitive and a ceiling that's above the line of overpowered. In most games, even if you do make the location better, you know, that location could have popped up anyways. You might already have cards to take advantage of it, but I don't think it's actually overpowered. Okay, even if it was pretty consistently giving you good locations, because your opponent could be playing a similar deck and they could take advantage of it too. So I don't think it's overpowered, and I think on average, Nocturne is going to move once, okay, and you can obviously use other cards to synergize with that, and you're going to replace a neutral location with another neutral location, okay? Most locations in Marvel Snap are just neutral. Maybe they give you a little bit of help, but they give your opponent that same help. And so you're going to switch it out for another location that really doesn't matter too much unless you're using Nocturne as a tech card, in which case you save her to get rid of Limbo. And that's what you're going to do. You play Nocturne on turn 3. The locations are neutral. If your opponent plays Magic or Storm or something and you want to get rid of the location, you move Nocturne to do that. And on average, you're pretty close to floor and ceiling, so I think she's just very consistent. The first deck that I'm excited to try Nocturne in is a classic Silky Smooth list. I simply took the list, took out Spider-Man, who's also a 3/5, put in Nocturne. Okay, so I took out a move card and I put in another 3-cost 5-power move card. Nocturne is losing the ability to move an opponent's card like Spider-Man, but you are getting this location changing ability, and this is just going to work. Okay, is Nocturne a better option here than Spider-Man? I don't know. We'll have to see, but this deck does just work. Nocturne will just work in here because she can power up Angela, she can power up Kraven, get the energy bonus from Hope Summers, and the location power up bonus from Elsa Bloodstone. Next up is the deck that I am most excited to try out Nocturne in. I've got this Legion Lockdown list. Now I mentioned before that I love Legion. I also love Lockdown. Okay, turn 4 Storm into turn 5 Legion makes me smile all day. I know it's toxic. I know people hate it. You can also do turn 3 Storm, turn 4 War Machine, turn 5 Legion on the flooded location to lock down the board. But now we've also got Nocturne, okay? So maybe you didn't get Storm or you're not going for the full board lockout. Well, we can use Nocturne to try and find a location that's really good for Legion. And I've also got Luke Cage in here. If you get like Sewer System or any location that gives cards minus power for being played there, so good for Luke Cage and Legion. Okay, you copy that location. Luke Cage protects your cards and your opponent's cards are all getting minus power. Nocturne can help you fish for those locations, even help you fish for Borrowed No Name so you can hit it with Legion and just win the game. It's going to be cheesy. I think she works great with this list. And lastly, we have to try out Nocturne in a Sarah Surfer deck. She costs 3. Silver Surfer loves that, like I mentioned, and we do just have this little bit of extra tech from Nocturne being able to change a location. That's something I think Surfer decks really like having if it's possible, and I think Nocturne makes that possible. So I'm excited to try this one out. I don't know if this is better than just a Sarah Toxic Surfer list that's running around right now, but I'm interested in it. All right, so we are going to be breaking down the Spotlight week for May 7th to 14th. Here are all of the Spotlight variants for Nocturne, K-Era, and Celine. Now, in terms of token value, it's actually amazing, okay? These are all Series 5 cards. They're all worth 6,000 tokens. So any key that you use to open one of these cards is basically worth 6,000 tokens. That's as good as it gets. But in terms of being competitive, I think it's bad. Okay, now I'm not including Nocturne here because she is not released yet. I'm really focusing on K-Era and Celine. They're not horrible cards, okay? They're decent, they're fine. K-Era is probably a little bit better. There's no deck that needs K-Era, really. There's some decks that she works in, some Zoo-type decks, high Evo decks, but they're fine without her, okay? If you don't have K-Era in your collection, you can play those decks, you can play any other deck you want still. Same thing with Celine. She does work fairly well in like a Galactus list where you have Green Goblin, Hobgoblin. You know, you can hit your goblins, make them more negative power and annoy your opponent, but you don't need her, okay? If you don't own Celine, you can still play a Galactus Hobgoblin deck if you want. So these cards just aren't needed for your collection. You never need to chase after them. So we don't really have one card here besides potentially Nocturne that is really a must-have for your collection. In terms of the variants, art is subjective. For me, I think they're okay. The Nocturne one's fine. I don't think it's crazy. I don't think this is K-Era's best variant. I think it's just kind of alright. The Celine one's pretty good. I kind of like the Celine one. Depending on your style, you may really like it or not like it much. But I just think this is kind of an okay Spotlight week. You know, it's 2 Series 5 cards. I just wish they were better Series 5 cards. So for my final ratings on Nocturne herself, in terms of being fun, yes, good fun. Again, she's doing 2 things, right? That's 2 interactions you get to enjoy out of one single card. So you're gonna get to move. That can have games where just moving itself is beneficial and fun, and the location changing, especially with the RNG, is gonna create some wild moments, some highlights very memorable moments, whether it's good or bad. In terms of being flexible, amazing, okay? You can put Scarlet Witch in any deck. She doesn't see a ton of play right now, but you could just put her in any deck that you want. Same thing with Nightcrawler, he fits into a ton of decks. Nocturne still fits in, okay? She's almost getting to a kind of expensive point, but she's just under halfway there. She's a 3-cost card, so you can still fit her in. If you like making your own decks, she's great, okay? You can throw her in any kind of custom deck and it provides some utility, which is nice. In terms of being competitive, I think she's good, okay? Again, she has some potential and she's doing multiple things, and I said earlier that cards that do more than one beneficial thing in one game, okay, that they can do 2 positive things, are generally really good. Now, the only downside I see with Nocturne, and I showed these decks here, and maybe the lockdown one she actually makes better if you fish for good locations. There's not too many decks that I think really need Nocturne. Okay, maybe Silky Smooth, but cards, you really want them to just make a deck better. Okay, you want an existing deck that's already good, and to have a new card and see that this card makes that existing good deck great, okay, or makes a great deck even better. I'm not sure Nocturne does that. She's a viable option, she's competitive, but I don't know how many decks she actually takes to the next level, so I don't think she has that amazing value, okay? She is nice, is unique, but maybe isn't exactly needed. But I think she's going to be fun. I do think she's going to be good and produce good value in decks, and I think she's actually very consistent. So my rating for Nocturne is to get her, okay? I really do think she's worth it. Again, especially if you like making your own decks, just custom homebrew stuff, you're going to use Nocturne a lot. I really think you're going to put Nocturne in a lot of different things. I know I'm going to. She's just a general fit for things, okay? If you are only looking for top meta cards, cards that are just gonna, increase your chances of hitting infinite fast or winning infinity conquest, I don't think Nocturne is that card, but I think she's good, and I think she will be very competitive and see a good amount of play over time. Okay, she'll see play right away, but in the next coming months, I think she'll also see a good amount of play still. So let me know what you think about Nocturne and the best decks for her. If it's not one I've shown in this video, the best combos you think she might have, or best synergies. And until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.